Okay. All right. This is the Cortez City City Council work session. Today's Tuesday, April 25th, and the time is 5:35. I apologize for starting 5 minutes late, but we're all eating good food. So, all right. On our agenda, we have an update on the new land use code process. And make sure the mic is hot.
Greetings, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having us in tonight and for meeting a little bit early so we could go over a few important things. As we've been discussing, the City of Cortez is embarking on a land use code rewrite and housing policy project. And with us tonight, we have our consultants, Logan Simpson. They were chosen after a competitive process, and we're really glad to have them here this week. We've been meeting with a lot of folks talking about land use code issues, concerns, wishes, and so even though they've just really been here, got here yesterday, we've already had a lot going on. But once again, thanks for meeting or having us tonight, and I'll introduce Jen Gardner, who's with Logan Simpson.
All right, can you hear me okay through this microphone? Okay. I also want to introduce Michaela Dunphy. I know a few of you have met her through the interview process, but she's my right hand, or we are each other's right hands on this project. So you'll see her just as much as me, hopefully, throughout the process. But I just want to go through a little bit of what we've been doing and what we have on the agenda over the next few months. So we kicked off the project formally a few weeks ago with staff, and then this week we're calling kind of our public kickoff. So this morning we had a city tour. Staff was wonderful in taking us all over the city of Cortez, showing us all the nuances and some great development and some land available for development where maybe some transportation connections could be used in the future. So it was really good to get kind of the right in the weeds on what's on the ground and what you guys are dealing with on a daily basis. So that was extraordinarily helpful. And then we kicked off our community listening sessions this afternoon, and we've met already with 5 or 6 folks just today. I think we have a little over 20 of these meetings scheduled between now, throughout the rest of this week and into next week. We have a couple of virtual meetings scheduled next week. Not all of them are just one person. Some of them it's 1 or 2 people that are coming. So we, by the end of this, hopefully we'll have heard from 20 or 30 folks in the community. And we're already hearing a good broad variety of feedback, which is exactly what we hope for. We don't always want to hear just from one kind of perspective. So we're already hearing some really good ideas and thoughts on where the code could go. So I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end of the presentation, but as part of this project, as Rachel said, we have a housing plan update that ties into the housing needs assessment. There's an online housing conversation scheduled for the week of May 8th, I believe, as of now, the following week. Okay, so beginning of May, we'll be having a housing conversation. That'll be broken up into a series of housing conversations that that Sarah, our housing consultant, will be leading those meetings. So, so that's exciting as well, kind of on the tail end of that housing needs assessment. And we have started working on some branding. We'll be launching a website here shortly that'll have just information for the project as we move forward, and as we have documents ready to review, those will be posted on the website. So a good way to just kind of keep the communication open with the community on what we're doing at any given time. So that's kind of what we call the foundation. That's what we're working on April into May. And then we dive directly into the true assessment phase. So this foundation piece is feeding into that assessment. All these community listening sessions are really giving us the foundation we need to really dive into review of your existing code to try to see where there might be some issues, where there might be barriers to certain elements of design or development. And, you know, try to find the boundaries on where the code maybe goes too far or doesn't go far enough. So we're already hearing some good feedback on that now, and then we'll start to kind of read through the code with these thoughts in mind. And as we read through the code, any red flags that come up to us, just from our personal or professional experience. And also we have a legal representation on our team that can help us with anything that we think could be getting into legal territory. So May through July, we'll be reviewing the code against the comments that we've heard. We do what we call an issue analysis, just kind of, like I said, determining where some potential issues or topics to really dive deeper into our, we'll be doing our housing plan assessment at that same time. And we also review your code against your comprehensive plan and any other guiding documents or policies that exist in the city. So we'll just kind of try to make sure everything's aligned. And that will result in an assessment report. And that report is usually about 20 to 40 pages, depending on kind of the amount of detail that we need to put into it. And it will highlight what we heard from the public. Usually when we get done with all of our community listening sessions, there are certain topics that kind of resonate, some common themes between those conversations. And we'll usually highlight those in the assessment report, that these were the key topics that the community really felt we needed to address. And then we go into basically each chapter of your code and, does this need, some of the chapters might not need a whole lot of work and some might need more work. If we're reorganizing anything, that's at the assessment report phase is where we'll have a table that shows where maybe some pieces might be reorganized into other chapters for readability. So we'll also identify where there will be more graphics that will come throughout the process, but we'll identify at the very beginning some key points or places where we might want to develop some graphics to help describe the language. So that full assessment report does take us probably a good month to really get through, and we'll be working with staff through reviewing that. And then it'll come to you all. So we'll present that at Planning Commission and City Council, just to say, hey, did we get the message right? Does this seem like a fair path to take before we ever put pen to paper? So that to us is a very important stage to say, that's the point at which we say, well, I'm not really sure that that's a big concern, but let's go down that path and explore it a little further. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing from now into probably July. And then we start to really dive in and put pen to paper. In our drafting process, we do in a series of modules. So we don't draft the whole thing all at once. We'll take little chunks, like we'll look at the zoning districts in really good detail and start to assess if there needs to be any changes to those. Then we'll maybe look at the use table and the uses and where there might need to be some modifications, if you will. Application procedures is usually a big chunk that really needs a good deep dive to make sure that the procedures are streamlined and resulting in good process with the city. So we'll take it in these smaller chunks, and as we get kind of a module or a chunk complete, and we review it with staff and the advisory committee, then we'll bring those forward to you all for kind of a work session to say, here's where we're at, kind of here's where we came from, here was the recommendations that led us to this, and here's the changes that we've proposed at this time. And that gives you all a chance, kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down, we're headed in the right direction, let's look at this a little bit further, so we can really fine-tune these chunks or modules before we ever get to adoption. Then when you get to adoption, you're not having to look at this whole gigantic document for the first time. You've already seen the chunks as they've come through. And that goes for the public as well. When we feel comfortable with the document to come to you all, we would post it on the website for a public review at the same time to get that feedback. So trying to kind of bring everyone along with us along for the ride. So that will be take us from August through next April, which I know looks like a long time frame, but it takes quite a bit of work to get all of that done. And then we anticipate adoption next May and June. And that just results in Planning Commission hearings, City Council hearings, probably a work session with each, and then any final document edits and graphics before we want to codify it. So any questions on the overall process? And there will be opportunities for public input, like we've said before, through each of those modules as we go.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I've just scribbled a bunch of questions.
Sure.
So it sounds like there will be a larger opportunity for public input as we go, but I'm just curious, like, in your experience, what a good sample size for a population our size is? Because it seems like, we might get like 30 or 40 in this first round?
Yeah, I would say for your size of community, actually, any size of community, 30 to 40 on a code is actually a good, I know it sounds very low, but code is very technical, and it's oftentimes really hard to get people excited about it. So if we can get 30 or 40 people really engaged and really providing good quality feedback, I would be super happy. Anything above that is fantastic as well.
Okay, and then
yeah.
when is the best time for like our feedback? Because I've been kind of like, we're citizens and
Yeah.
council members.
So tonight is a great
Okay.
opportunity for that. In a couple slides, I have some questions for you guys, and I'd love to get a good conversation going. And this conversation tonight, some of you might have good answers, some good solid feedback and thoughts to put into it. If you still need some time to think about it, then please just schedule a one-on-one session with us. We'd be happy to sit down and talk further. Or even an email, if it's easier for you to just write out all your thoughts and email them, that's fine as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then whenever you guys create the website, is there going to be a way for the public to sign up for like an email list, so every time you have a chunk done, they can automatically get that if it's available?
I think so. Do you know if we'll have that capability on the website? I would like to have that opportunity.
Okay.
So to sign up for emails, yeah. And we're collecting the emails from everyone that we speak to, and we're letting them know as we close our listening sessions that we're, keeping their email, and if they want to stay informed, we'll put them on a list, and hopefully that list will just get bigger and bigger throughout the project.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question about the listening tour that you're doing. Are you tracking residents versus non-residents? Is it wide open to everybody in the county to give input, or what's
Yeah.
that look like?
So we're tracking in the sense as when we first engage with folks, when they first sit down to meet with us, we ask them, a little bit about themselves. Are you a city resident, a county? Do you own a business? Whatnot. Today I met with a county resident that does own property in the city, and also, when we got to talking, we realized, she uses city services and really is a part of the community, the city community. So we're open to anyone in the area, just knowing that we're not talking about the county code, so, we're talking specifically about the city code, and as far as there's understanding there, it's, anyone in this area is going to be integrated into the community in some fashion. So,
my thought is, with your timeline, May, June 24, that's right after an election here, and there
Oh.
could be a new majority. So that's just whoever gets elected, trying to catch them up before they have to vote it in, essentially.
good idea.
Just to keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. We're always chasing elections with our code updates. All right, any other questions on just the general schedule and kind of process? Okay. As part of our kind of kickoff with staff, and we had a few other members as part of this process, we've developed some guiding principles to guide us through the project, and we've developed a logo for the project that we'll start to put on all of our information that goes out to the community. So we've come up with these 7 guiding principles, and there's some additional language that goes along with them. This will all be posted on the website as soon as we get that launched. But number 1 is ensure that the land use code is user-friendly. Number 2, make the right things easy, which kind of applies to any kind of development that you feel is really desirable for the city of Cortez. It shouldn't have to go through a ton of hoops and valleys. It should be a very streamlined process. Balancing flexibility and predictability, that's the biggest challenge for us because flexible and predictable aren't always in the same room together. Engage with the public, right-size the standards and procedures, preserve and enhance local character, and then respond to housing needs. So are there any questions? And I know The full text was given to you all in your packets, so did you have any questions about any of those guiding principles, or have anything you want to add or edit or anything, or does it seem pretty fair to you? Good? Okay. And then that logo was kind of built based on your logo, and just has all the different pieces in it that we hope to achieve throughout the process. So, all right. So here's where you get to start to interact. So we have a few questions for you. These are the same questions we've been asking the community members in our listening sessions. We basically want to know, is the land use code easy to use? What revisions would make it more user-friendly? What works well with the current code, and maybe what doesn't work well with the current code. And those items over in the gray sidebar are just some kind of food for thought. We're looking at things like land use impacts, noise, light, traffic, use standards. So what, where can a daycare center be, or where can a car wash be? What zone districts does that make sense to have them permitted in? Zoning and dimensional standards, so looking at the different zone districts, your building heights, building setbacks, kind of all those dimensional standards of what you can do within that box. Application procedures and process. Review criteria, which becomes really huge for you all when you're reviewing an application. Is there really good criteria for you to review the application against? And then just any additional standards that might be missing from the land use code. So I'd like to open up to some discussion if any of you have any thoughts on any of these questions.
All right, I'll go first. So I think the first thing that people open the code to look at is the use regulation table. Okay, it's my zoning. What's allowed in my zoning? Is it permitted? Is it conditional? Can I have a temporary? Or is it not allowed at all? And looking through this, it's a long list of things where some don't have definitions, so we don't quite know what they mean. They can be interpreted different ways. Sometimes the definition is contradictory, and then there's obviously things missing. When we had the stage built at Montezuma Park, there was nothing about, structure like that in our code. The flea market / farmer's market thing that we saw just our last meeting, there's nothing in the code, about that as well. So I think that table is gonna be important, that it's comprehensive and it includes all the things that, we think are necessary, and then it has clear definitions of what those mean. Just getting rid of any ambiguity.
Perfect. Are there any, this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but you already mentioned a couple of uses. Are there any other uses you can think of that maybe have come through, or discussions have been had that you feel are not captured in the use table? And you can pass on that and
Right.
come back to it. But that's one thing that we'll need to look at, is any other uses that
Yeah.
maybe we haven't even thought of yet that are potentially new uses. So,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, I'll have to think about it.
Anyone else?
I guess one of my thoughts is that we had something come up a couple months ago, property off of Empire Street, and I was kind of surprised at the zoning, like I wasn't exactly sure about it. And sometimes, to me, it feels like we kind of have a patchwork in the city of zoning uses, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be, part of this process, but it sure would be nice to kind of step back and take a look at that map and say, does this still make sense? In terms of, is this a multifamily neighborhood? Is it mixed use? What exactly is it? And I think, for me personally, that clarification would help, and probably for the public as well. But.
Okay. Yeah, and I will say what we have done in projects similar to this in the past is set the stage for, do you have the right zone districts too? So if there's a zone district that's missing, maybe we need to build a new zone district into the code. That doesn't mean land gets zoned that right away, but you can build that framework into the code. Same with your existing zone districts. If they don't feel like they're capturing what's there, say R1 describes mostly what your R1s look like, but maybe it's a little off. You know, we can look at dimensional standards. I know one of the things that we've already talked about is crosswalking through GIS, crosswalking your whole city and looking at the lot sizes to make sure that the dimensional standards are matching up so that you're not ending up with a whole bunch of non-conforming lots based on the wrong lot size or something, so, okay.
Yeah, that gets to one of the issues I was going to bring up is just non-conforming lots. I think
Right.
we currently, with our current code, we have a lot. It doesn't,
Yeah.
I don't think our current code fits the as-built community.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I was thinking is just right now, we have four residential zoning districts plus 2 other kind of mixed-use districts that include residential uses. That seems like a lot for this size community. That maybe is a little more complicated and complex than necessary. So I think anywhere where we can remove some of that complication and simplify, I think would be helpful.
Great.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that there's a lot of non-conforming, and I think it's trying to balance like where we want to go with the zoning, but that it's not so far that everything is non-conforming, and it's a huge leap to get to,
Yeah.
you know, what we want. Yeah, so, I mean, is rezoning and making new zones and a new zoning map part of this? Or would that be something that this will set up for and we could do that
Yes.
as a next step?
Yeah. I don't want to close the door to it completely. Redoing the actual map is a very lengthy process, a lot of community outreach. I know we're doing a lot of community outreach, but that's even a different kind of community outreach. Like I said, what we did in a small community up in northern Colorado, we set the stage for it with new zone districts, and then they took that through and really worked with their planning commission to identify exactly where the boundaries needed to change. And just recently, we adopted the code a year ago, and they just now adopted the new zoning map. So you can do it separately. In fact, it might be advised to get the code in place and then do the map. So,
Okay.
but yeah, because it's a very nuanced conversation. Once you get all the pieces in place, then looking at every little kind of parcel and where does this fall, and working with those property owners to make sure that you're, that they're on board with the proposed new zoning, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I would add, and at your regular meeting tonight, we've got a discussion about the Senate Bill 213, and even if that doesn't pass, I would expect that there may be some legislative changes coming in that would encourage communities to kind of blend their residential zone districts to allow denser housing in various zone districts. And so I think it might be a good idea, certainly, to wait and see what happens with any pending legislation before we recreate the wheel, because the state may tell us what we have to create. And but it's certainly a discussion that is going on not just in Cortez, and I'm sure the Logan Simpson folks can attest to that it's going statewide and actually nationwide.
It's like wildfire right now.
So I've had, within the past year, like 2 developers approach me and just say that they felt like the application process was really onerous.
Okay.
But it was in comparison to the county, so it wasn't
Okay.
really necessarily a big surprise. And I'll be honest, like, I've never gone through the process myself. And so it's hard for me to kind of compare whether or not that's a true statement or not. Can you recommend or like a place that we can compare, like a city that's similar to ours in Colorado, that's a similar size, to just see, is that a true statement or not?
Yeah, absolutely. When we look through your application procedures, we can kind of crosswalk what other communities are doing, and kind of bring some options to the table for you guys to say, specifically with subdivision, site plans and some of those are usually a little bit more straightforward, but subdivision processes, communities handle those a variety of different ways, so we can bring forward kind of some different options of, when they come to Planning Commission and City Council, is final plat an administrative process or not, and kind of how that process works. So, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this also going to address like our variance process? Because
Yes.
when I was on the Board of Adjustments and Appeals, it felt like very reasonable cases came, whereas a unique situation, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense, I want to approve this, but the whole list of like, you have to meet every single criteria for a variance, it seemed like almost impossible.
Yeah, we can absolutely address that, and we will review your variance criteria and review that with you guys. We have a number of different options that we can go with variance criteria, so.
Okay. And hopefully we'll minimize the need for that with this,
Yes,
but.
that was going to be my next statement is, and that is another thing, if you guys are seeing, and I guess the Board of Adjustment probably would know this better, but certain variances coming through again and again and again, like a particular setback or a parking variance or something. Those are the things we want to look at and say, okay, if this is happening again and again and again, is that just because, or is there a real hardship there that we could address with this code to reduce the variances, so. And it should be very hard to get a variance through, so, but it shouldn't be impossible. There should be an option there, so.
Do you have a special listening session for developers, or are they just kind of invited to the general?
They're just invited to meet with us, yeah.
Okay.
Generally.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of us, and myself included, are interested in ways that we can use the land use code or make it simpler to encourage things like affordable housing and to fall in line with our water conservation ideals. Because I think right now when you build a new home, you have to have a lawn and encourage more xeriscaping and conservation.
Yeah. Reverse that, maybe?
Yeah, I'm also interested, and I don't know how we address this really, but so, it's been way too long since we've done a land use code update. How can we ensure in the future that it doesn't go this far out?
Oh, between updates?
Yeah, and what's the ideal?
That's a good question. I get this question a lot, and honestly, most codes go about 20 years before being like wholesale updated or comprehensively updated. It's kind of, you have to kind of, it's almost a little like, thumb to the wind kind of thing. Are we starting to see development not keep up with our goals and objectives for a city? That's when you definitely need to take a hard look at your code. Honestly, if you update your comprehensive plan, a lot of times it's really good to come in right after that with a code update to make sure any goals or policies that were placed in that comprehensive plan are implemented immediately or, within a short period of time. So, and I know comp plans are supposed to be looked at, I believe, every 5 years in some perspective. So a big code overhaul every 5 years is too much. So I would say 10 to 20 years is probably pretty sufficient. With there's going to be text amendments, and they're never perfect. So you're going to have some patches throughout the years. And your code's actually organized very logically right now with the way the chapters are organized. There might be a few pieces that could kind of move around, but some of the older codes are so hard to read, you can't find anything anywhere. So you already have a really good foundation to kind of work from, and I think moving forward, we'll just keep, enforcing that foundation so that as you do have text amendments or patches, they slide in effortlessly and don't cause a lot of contradictions.
Go ahead, Robert. Okay. Is like an administrative approval different than like permitted use?
Yes. So just a permitted use by right, in a lot of situations, there isn't a process. I'm trying to think of one in particular. Well, say a single-family home on a parcel, you do have to get a building permit, but do your building permits come through you guys for review of like the setbacks? Okay, so in some communities, there's a separate, like a development permit application that if you're submitting a building permit, it also has to come through development review, but that's a good example of just a permitted use by right that doesn't have any particular planning approvals on it. An administrative approval would be a use or something, say, I'm going to use a car wash again, it just came to mind. So say a car wash is permitted in a particular zone district, so you're zoned that use, but you would still need to submit a site plan to ensure that you're meeting all the requirements. That would be an administrative approval that would, because it's permitted, it would just come through the planning department, but you would have that site plan component with it, so.
Okay, because I feel like there's some things that, like, you know, it takes a long time to go to meetings. You have to go to planning and zoning, and then you have to go to city council. But I do want to require a site plan and, you know, a more comprehensive application packet. So maybe incorporating like administrative approvals and some things. And I'd lean on Rachel to really know what those are, or what you think would be best for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we can really look, one of the things that we will do through this process, and you hit on it, the very first comment you made, is we were going to take your whole use table, pull it into an Excel spreadsheet, and workshop it, toss it back and forth. You know, it might, one day we all might say, this is permitted, and then the next day, wait, no, this one scenario, you know, let's think through this, and so we'll really dive into that use table in detail.
Okay.
And that's when we can talk through some of these scenarios, you know. In this particular situation, maybe it makes no sense for it to come through that whole process, and if the standards are pretty straightforward, you know, if you meet X, Y, and Z parameters, great, it can go through administrative approval. If you hit threshold F, now you have to come through the additional process or something.
David, go ahead.
Yes, based on our previous attempt at, I'll say no more about that. In our current presentation, have we done enough homework to avoid having another crash and burn, and so that the people in the community can understand and open up to what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at that process as in my rearview mirror. We're moving forward with hopefully a very different process. And honestly, anytime, if you guys have any thoughts on how we can set things up on the website even to make sure people understand what the code is and isn't, that's one thing. We usually put what a land use code is, what it addresses, what it doesn't address, to try to help, you know, communication or education of what the process is. So hopefully we can set a better foundation here at the beginning and get things going in a better direction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there ways within zoning districts to allow kind of variable setbacks to match like an existing block or existing community? Because I think that's one of the issues we see now is that our community is built kind of slowly over time. So it may have been 3 codes ago where half the houses were built, and 2 codes ago where another quarter were built, and then this last code where a few were built. And so if there's existing garages that go all the way to the property line, in a lot of ways it would make more sense for that block or that area to have all the garages be able to be allowed to go to that property line, that kind of thing. Is there ways to include that kind of flexibility to match the as-built environment?
There is. The language might sound a little fluffy when we start to develop it, but yes, there are ways to, I don't ever want to say, you know, compatible use. We try to spell that out and what the compatibility is. But yes, we have done that in the past where the garage example is a great one where it's built on the lot line, but now the new code might say you need a 5 or 10 foot setback, and now everything looks different. And so we can use adjacency to develop some compatibility language.
So, and that I would think would be one of the ways we could avoid the variance process,
Yeah.
because you're creating that flexibility in
Yeah. Another way to go about that is to create, and this would be if there were certain kind of neighborhood niches that, we could really define in a certain category, but we can create overlays, like neighborhood protection overlays, kind of, where, say you have a whole area that was built under a previous code and all the setbacks are very, non-conforming to your new code. We could create a whole set of standards for that particular area that are different than the underlying zoning. If that's just one approach. Sometimes that is a little bit more convoluted, adds layers, but there are ways that we can address that.
Okay, thank you.
But we also, I wonder if some setbacks are because of fire?
Yes,
Fire
so
code and building codes?
There does become a fire separation. With accessory buildings, garages are kind of in that fuzzy area, but like a shed, they fall in a little bit different category because they're not made for human habitation. So it's typically your inhabited buildings that have to meet fire code and a certain building separation, which usually is 10 feet. I know some communities have said they can shrink it down to 7 feet, but I've talked to fire departments about that, and they said that the 7 feet is sufficient for fire protection, but that's if there's nothing stored. And they said everyone's always storing bikes and garbage cans and things, and they said when that happens, then that closes off their access for the most part. So 10 feet is usually your minimum standard of building separation for fire codes.
Okay.
I have a really quick question for you that's
Sure.
probably tangential to what's up on the TV there. Can you kind of characterize who typically comes to a listening session? And the reason I ask that is because when you said 30 or 40 at first, I was like, oh, that's not that many. But when I look at those 3 questions, it is someone who has either a vested interest or they've had probably mostly a negative sort of interaction with the city that wants to make sure that they get their feedback, and probably fewer people that say, it's great, everything's been fine. So who typically comes to these listening sessions to answer those 3 questions?
The 2 folks you mentioned, I mean, the folks that have had that experience usually come, folks that have property in the city that have, so out of the people that have signed up so far, the people that I know, some are, Chamber of Commerce or business owners or real estate professionals that just kind of understand the market and understand what they've seen and what they would like to see. We always get a couple of residents that are just invested in some, I don't want to say agenda item, but maybe they're really passionate about environmental pieces that they want to make sure get in the code, or they're really passionate about affordable housing and want to make sure that that piece kind of follows the track that they're expecting. So we reached out to, I would say, a whole slew of different people, developers, business owners, residents alike. So, and already today we met with a couple of folks from the county and a bunch of folks that live in the city. So it's a mixed bag right now of their interests. So.
I want to talk about like another section is like lot coverage, and this kind of goes to what Lydia was saying about like reducing water usage for lawns and stuff. Maybe really looking at like lot coverage, and I know that goes to density. And one thing I will advocate for the code that was attempted to pass a few years ago was it had a strong section about landscaping and what that meant and what kind of like native plants were allowed, and I just want to make sure that that's like some of that is incorporated or kind of in there. One of the concerns that I think the community, why they weren't against it was like all zones have to have a minimum of 10% landscaping, some is more. Well, that hadn't always been enforced, and so they felt like it was brand new, but it's already in this code. And so I want to make sure that we look at that and that we have real conversations and see what that means. Encourage the xeriscaping or native plants or, drought tolerant stuff. But we do want the community to look nice. Everyone wants more trees, at least I do. But we also need to be conscious that we are in a drought area.
Great.
So.
Yeah, I was thinking about exactly the same thing earlier, and it might make more sense to kind of broaden the definition of landscaping. to include xeriscaping and drought-tolerant plants and things like that, not be so specific with a list of, here are the plants that you're allowed. Maybe that list becomes a little more specific around xeric plants too.
And in a lot of communities, we pull that, we'll reference that list in the code, but the list actually lives outside of the code, so it can be amended over time. Is that kind of what you're thinking as well, if we did develop a plant list?
That's a good
Okay,
idea.
great. And I do want to address another comment that you made about the last code effort where, something was already in your current code and caused disruption. One thing that we've been doing in other communities, and we would like to do that again here, is each of these little modules that come through, we'll prepare a little, probably usually they're 1 page, they might be a 2-page summary that says, here's what we're not changing in your current code, here are the, what we're changing, and here's maybe some new things. So hopefully that could help address that issue moving forward and say, your code already has, landscape regulations for 10% of every parcel or something. We're changing that by zone district, or we're going to, add this piece to that or something. So I'm hoping that'll help kind of keep the communication open throughout the process on what's really changing. Because it's a lot of text to read through all the red lines and figure out what changed, but if you have a quick summary guide, I think that'll help.
I think that will really help us and the community, because, last time it was like, okay, here's this big new document.
Yeah.
And then you have to read the old one, read the new one, remember, and
Right.
do that comparison yourself.
Yeah. And we will redline your existing documents, so you'll see where everything is proposed to be stricken, and we do that through Word so it can reverse itself. So, so we can, if we have a meeting and you say, well, actually, we really liked that, well, let's not delete that one section or something, so.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? You guys are giving us some really great feedback. Michaela's taking furious notes back there, so.
I guess my other thought too is like when we were updating our language around ADUs and allowing it in more zones, and then we reduced the parking to allow just one parking spot for an ADU. It just makes me think about like I know we live where it's a rural town and it's car centric because we just don't have public transportation, but I do want thinking of the future, I want to have opportunity to incorporate multimodal and just things that, I don't know. Just
Yeah. Good. Yeah, that one is probably one of the more tricky ones with a community that's fairly built out like yours, but we'll definitely be exploring that throughout the process.
Okay.
I heard today from one member that they said sidewalks. We need sidewalks everywhere. So we're definitely hearing this from the community as well.
Great, yeah, 'cause we would like to be more walkable.
Yeah, yep. Anything else you guys want to share? We've got some more time.
Well, I guess I just kind of have a question when you were talking about sidewalks. It popped into my head around like sort of the comprehensive plan and some of those big ideas that, we really spent some time working, and kind of where do those things dovetail? Is there a way to really kind of like call out, like, this is the land use code, and, this part that's been put into the comprehensive plan is really important to us, and it was deemed important by past city councils or the citizens or whatever. Like, is there a way to call it out?
Yes, so there are a couple of ways. Through our assessment report, we will bring relevant comprehensive plan pieces into the assessment report to say, well, your comprehensive plan was very clear that this community really needs more sidewalks and more connectivity. So then where we're talking about that in our assessment report of what section we need to update sidewalk standards or connectivity standards, we'll actually put that actual comprehensive plan goal or policy reference right there in a little box that says, here's where we're getting, we heard it from the public, you have it in your comprehensive plan, here's our recommended change to address all of that. So, yeah. We can actually put, I don't love to do this, but you can put some comprehensive plan language in the code in kind of italics at the beginning of a chapter if it's really important. Like I said, sometimes it gets a little fuzzy. You have to be really clear that this is from your comprehensive plan, and then as you update your comprehensive plan, you have to update that in the code. So that's why I caution with that one, but definitely the assessment report will bring clear guiding policies through. Same with the housing needs assessment and housing plan. Anything that comes out of those will reference directly in that assessment report to just tie it all together. So, yeah.
In terms of like new subdivisions, I don't know if we're ever gonna get a new subdivision, but we have a lot of platted subdivisions that don't have infrastructure, and mistakes were made in the past. But is this code, can that help this in the future? Because like we didn't bond things, so now it's like we're stuck building the streets and the utilities, or it's just gonna live like that for, a long time. I guess, how can we, I don't know, better prepare ourselves if a new subdivision does come in, that we make sure all those things are taken care of?
This came out of one of our discussions today as well. And yes, we can make sure that certain language is put in your code for bonding or posting sureties for new subdivisions.
Okay.
So, yes. And we'll work with you guys on the right level, because there's different levels of bonding. You can do bonding or letters of credit, which, it depends on a number of scenarios. But yeah, we'll talk through that.
And then when you do a subdivision, I know you have to dedicate, is it like land either to the city or the school or both, or you can do the cash in lieu? Oh, that's another thing, is calculating the cash in lieu amount. I feel like that's, could be improved.
Okay.
But is that required by the state, or, because we don't really need all of these little pieces of land
Right.
everywhere.
It's not required by the state specifically. We have updated codes recently where, similar to your situation, where maybe there's enough parks and it's more about maintaining the existing parks or putting improvements in the existing parks, so we can change from the park dedication, kind of depart from that a little bit. The school's the same thing. I've worked in a lot of communities where they don't need school sites anymore. A lot of the schools are saying they just need the funding. So typically it's just the fee, just pay the fee, don't even provide the land as an option. So we can talk through that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sensing a lot of changes in the subdivision code based on what we're talking about. Maybe not big changes, but just kind of tightening, cleaning up, so. Yeah.
I've been thinking about this for years. So.
Okay.
I'm going to send you my
Good.
document.
It's a great point. It's like bookmark it and put a pin in it, because
Yeah.
I totally agree. Like, that's something that needs to be looked at.
What about if someone does a site plan, like, there's some places where the right-of-way hasn't quite been dedicated, having language for that,
Yes.
that it's clear that we're like, okay, we're going to get this right-of-way, and then, we'll take care of it, or, who's responsible for mowing, or who's responsible for
Okay.
the sidewalk maintenance, and,
Yep, we can work through some language on that.
okay.
All right. Any other discussion thoughts? Okay.
I think we're good.
I have, I think, one more slide here, yes. So I always like to kind of talk through the next steps. So as we said earlier, we're continuing our housing conversations, our community listening sessions throughout this week, and we have already some virtual ones set up for next week, and probably we'll see those trickle in for the next couple of weeks. The online housing conversation, I think I've been corrected, is not the week of May, it's the following week. Well, we're kind of, I think, still pinning it down, so, yeah. We will launch the website very shortly and finish our full code analysis, like I said in the schedule. This is a little sneak peek of what you will get out of the housing plan conversations. This is our housing expert has actually already created this little bridge, and it's just to kind of explain AMI percentages and how that relates to actual income. So that will be part of the conversation. I think it's probably actually started to happen through the housing needs assessment, and will trickle in through the rest of it. So That is all I have. If you guys have any other questions for me?
I had a question. It's less code related and more
Okay.
just housing needs assessment related.
Okay.
Will you be helping Cortez develop their baseline for the Prop 123 to find a baseline of housing needs that is actually achievable for our community, as opposed to some of the numbers coming out of the state are extremely high and not super realistic? Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be Willa. She's also on our team to kind of help dovetail these two projects together, but Rachel might have more. She's been much more involved in that.
Yeah, I think the housing needs assessment, which is almost final and will be presenting to council and the public on May 9th. They did some really great research and work on that because, yeah, our baseline as it stands, according to some of the state census data, is not really our baseline. So the housing needs assessment will definitely help us with that. And I did kind of add a little question about that on the draft to Willa and her team, and it's something that we can ask Sarah McLean, who's a subcontractor of Logan Simpson. Maybe they can help us determine what that baseline would be for the next steps for that.
Well, if there's no other questions, I want to sincerely thank you guys for your time tonight. It was great, really great feedback, and whoever in the community is listening, it's just great for us to get our heads into this code and understand where the problem, sections are, because yeah, I wouldn't know where to start otherwise. So it's good to get these ideas flowing. So. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're excited for this process, and we really appreciate all that you're doing. I think this is a good approach, so.
Good. All right. Well, until next time.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to general council discussion. Does any council member have an item they'd like to bring up, or? No? Okay, I think we'll end this meeting, and we'll start our regular meeting at 7:30 p.m.